So my name's Robert Van Way. I'm from New York in the USA. I'm senior lecturer and consultant here at Softwareica in cybersecurity, ethical hacking, and digital forensics. So in the USA, I worked in the police force in the New York State Criminal Justice Division. I was a digital forensics technical analyst and investigator with the New York Attorney General's office. So my experience is in all things related to crime and technology, including forensic examination of electronic devices, network analysis, open source intelligence, and pretty much anything else that involves technology. I first met Softwareica College back in about 2018, where I just gave a guest lecture on cybersecurity and the types of jobs that are available and what we do in those jobs. Since then, I've visited back and forth a few more times over the years, and then starting this past summer in July, I became full senior lecturer in cybersecurity and ethical hacking and digital forensics. Back in 2018, the field itself was quite different. So students were quite unfamiliar with what cybersecurity is, how ethical hacking works, and what kinds of jobs they might pursue and why they might even be receive an education in those topics. Whereas today, cybersecurity is much more well known around the world because it's a rapidly growing field, and it's a requirement everywhere, including Nepal, the US, any other country. So that part of it is pretty well understood by students now. Ethical hacking is still kind of a mysterious job area, we'll say. Many people hear the word hacker and they think, the bad stuff they see on TV and in the movies. But really, hacker is nothing more than a description for a person that exploits systems for a purpose. And so an ethical hacker does it for an ethical purpose, which is to help identify vulnerabilities and areas that attackers could use to infiltrate a system and create some kind of problem or steal data or some other sort of activity. So I think the cybersecurity field in general in Nepal is still in its earlier stages compared to some other places. It has not been a priority in the same way as other types of technical development have. And part of that is because Nepal is a smaller country. It's not widely known by a lot of other people in the world, so it wasn't a ready target like other places are. People target big banks and big data centers and things like that. And Nepal didn't have those compared to other countries. But that's changing rapidly, and it's even shown in just the statistics of cyber attacks that are occurring in Nepal, including against Nepal's own government, which happened recently. So cybersecurity in Nepal now is a priority, and it's a very high priority because of the fact that it didn't receive as much attention as it maybe should have, or a little bit earlier. So now it's going to be, companies are really going to have to focus on getting cybersecurity as a priority for their companies, fortifying their network environment and preventing attacks which are more increasingly turning toward Nepal. I've actually been quite surprised by the level of knowledge and interest that students have had. So at TechX back at the end of July, we had many +2 students even that came through and stopped, and I was able to talk with them and that. And kids that are between like 10 and 20 or so are very well aware of these things compared to their older counterparts like their parents and grandparents. So the awareness is not, I don't think, an issue insofar as they understand there's a potential hacking problem that exists out there, and there needs to be a defense for it. They're less aware about what that means for them as far as for study and for jobs. So educating more students on how their understanding of the situation translates into a job is still an area that requires a little bit of work. But I think as far as the awareness and even the interest, I don't think too many students have come, at least in my experience, to the pre-foundation classes for idle curiosity. I think they have come because they have a genuine interest in the field. They just don't know exactly how to identify that interest. I don't know how to answer what students are more likely to join, but the growing fields themselves, the areas where people are more and more ending up, is in especially like network security, because every company has network frameworks, and if it's a larger company, that can be a very large framework. There's also a much more robust field in like bug hunting and threat research, because as more and more things connect to the internet, that creates more and more opportunity for new attacks. So there's a growing field of people that are specifically looking to identify those attacks before they even happen. Ethical hacking is still, I think, one of the slower growing areas. But again, I think it's not just in Nepal where people are not really sure what that means, not really sure how to pursue it. It's also why it's one of the most well-paid jobs in the field. So I think those are the three primary areas, but cybersecurity crosses every type of device, every type of network. So really, student doesn't even have to know for sure what they want to do, because the opportunities sort of just begin to present themselves as they acquire more skills. I don't think it's a job field that's growing slower. I think it's a job field where we're producing graduates directly in that field slower. Like I said, I think part of it is because it is a challenging field, it's a difficult field. I think part of it is because there's still a little bit of unclarity or confusion among prospective students what that field actually is. And I think there's also a belief among some students that ethical hacking doesn't really translate to like other jobs if they decide they don't want to do that. But I think those are changing. I think the perception is just changing a little bit more slowly because it's a bit more of a mysterious job field. So the number one thing is, the easiest thing is passwords. Because we still use passwords. That may change, but for now we still use passwords. And I mean, if you've gotten a password from public Wi-Fi in some restaurants, it'll be the restaurant name and like 1, 2, 3. You know, that's not a good security measure. But also, like, just on personal accounts, you know, people use their phones for like banking, Facebook, Instagram, all kinds of things. Using proper passwords is one of the easiest ways to defend against you know, some kind of intrusion. The second thing is really would be for like to take a simple course on some things, because there's a lot of settings in our phone that most people don't know about or think about, that if you just make minor adjustments, it would secure your phone just so much more. But it's hard to sit and explain that generally because there's so many different phones. But that's another way that it can be done. And then the third thing is just having some awareness. You know, not opening files or clicking on links that you don't know what they are, not answering people who you don't know who are asking you stuff that may be a little bit kind of a little bit too sort of personal. Those three things alone really are a huge thing that most people could do that would really diminish it, because most individuals aren't targeted unless they're really easy targets. So if you just make it a little less easy, nobody wants to bother you because there's other people that are easier to attack. So I think there's a big difference between generations. Like I said before, I would say that a high school age person with a phone knows more about cybersecurity than maybe their 30 or 40-year-old parent, right? I think that's true in most places, but I think it's really true here because technology here, phone use, internet use, really rapidly grew for the current generation but not so much for like 40 and above. You know, even when I first came here 15 years ago, you know, you had to go to like an internet place just to make a phone call to someone like outside the country, for example, you know. And so, you know, I'm of that age group. So if I live here and I'm of that age group, that's still the mindset that I have. But those are also the people that own a lot of the businesses, you know. So that's kind of the awkward place that Nepal's in right now, is a lot of business owners are still from the generation that cybersecurity didn't even exist as a term, and now they're in the middle of like when it really needs to grow. So that's the challenge now. But educating students goes a long way to educating their parents. So it's not an impossible task, but it's a challenging one. Well, the challenge to that question is that unlike any other field, the field of computing, whether it's cybersecurity, development, networking, any of those things, grows so fast, it's hard to know in 5 years, right? So for example, even our cell phones, even in countries with the most developed networks, 5 years ago there were still people working on 3G, and now they're working on 5G, which from a technical standpoint is very different, right? So I think what you will see is you will see a huge explosion of cybersecurity jobs, but they won't look the same in 5 years that they do now. So the challenge of a place like Softwareica and schools like it will be to try to stay on pace with those changes. How do we formulate our courses to the new problems? You know, for instance, I mentioned passwords before. Passwords may not be much of a thing in 2 years because we're looking at shifts to tokens and different types of security certificates that would make it unnecessary to know a password. That would be a huge change. Everything we do is passwords, right? So it's hard to say, but one thing that I do know is computing's not going away unless some other thing happens that's beyond like any of us to guess. Computing itself is not going away. The interconnectivity of places around the world is not going away. This job field will only get bigger. It'll just look different every couple of years or maybe quicker. But as long as cybersecurity graduates know that going in and work to stay up with the field, I think it'll be one of the best areas for jobs and probably for pay as well. So when we use the term cybersecurity, we're talking about a really broad thing, and in many ways, ethical hacking is a subset of that broader category. So students that come and take a cybersecurity track and then specialize in ethical hacking basically become specialists in a certain aspect of cybersecurity. So the nice thing about like a program at Softwareica, for example, is that a student can explore that without having to be committed to see if that's what they actually want to do and whether they want to pursue it as an expertise. But even if one pursues it as an expertise and then later decides it's not something they want to do as a career, the tools that you get out of what we call penetration testing or ethical hacking are applicable at a very high level in many other fields. So the nice thing is you can almost become an expert in other parts of cybersecurity by getting the ethical hacking experience and education. But you can also do it the other way. You can start with a broader cybersecurity pursuit, not knowing for sure what you want to do. And ethical hacking is just a branch or a path along that way that you can go. So, and the great thing is that, like I said before about the jobs, is you can get experience anywhere so that you can decide if you want to continue that path like as your career or if you want to deviate and maybe move to a different expertise. In Nepal in particular, those two jobs, I think, will be among the fastest growing job fields. If they're not already, it will be very, very soon, because ethical hacking and cybersecurity in Nepal is a new and budding field, but it's as important as many others. It just hasn't had that influx of attention yet. So I think if students are considering it, they shouldn't consider a cybersecurity degree or an ethical hacking degree as a narrow scope. They can come in, and it's a very flexible degree because you learn so many important skills that are applicable in today's technology world.
Thank you.
Was that good? Are you